shoes on the other foot here. This is Bill Apter, and I'm talking here with the voice of championship wrestling, Gordon Solie. Gordon, tonight in Orlando is the opening of the Eddie Graham Sports Complex. Can you tell us something about this?
Well, first of all, of course, Championship Wrestling found an opportunity to purchase the property in the existing building that was known as the Orlando Sports Stadium, and subsequent to the news, the information we had received from Eddie that he was retiring, and so Championship Wrestling decided why not name this building in honor of him and the fact that he has been such an influence on sports in the entire state of Florida. He is actually, in a sense, the author of amateur wrestling in the high schools, and we felt that this is the least that Championship Wrestling could do for him in this respect.
How has Eddie Graham influenced Gordon Solie?
Well, he's had a powerful influence on my life. Eddie and I have been friends for a number of years, ever since Eddie first came to Florida back when Mike was just a baby. And I think we have probably one of the strongest friendships going, really. The man has never been afraid to counsel me. I've never been afraid to counsel him. He has become tremendously successful, not only as an athlete, but as a businessman. And I can only see more and better things for the citizenry of the state of Florida as a result of his retirement.
You've seen Eddie Graham at his the best times of his life and the worst times of his life. Is there one incident above all that stands out in Gordon Solie's mind?
Not really. I think, yeah, all right. I can say yes. There was a time that stands out, I guess, most of all, and this was years ago when Mike was coming along as a high school athlete. That he became a collegiate athlete, and he got goaded into a situation through the late Bobby Shane. Pardon me, and Shane made some comments, and Mike, having the same kind of family pride that Eddie did, took up the challenge as an amateur to meet Bobby Shane in the ring as a professional. And I guess that's the most worried, most upset that I've ever seen Eddie, and yet the proudest after the way Mike acquitted himself against the late Bobby Shane.
Okay, now many athletes always are, quote, threatening to retire. They retire for a few months, and 6 months later, it's the great comeback of. Do you think this is going to happen with Eddie Graham?
I doubt that. I doubt that very seriously. Eddie's had enough severe injuries over his lifetime, over his career in pro wrestling, that I doubt now that he could get himself back into the kind of shape that he would have to be in to try and step into that ring. Eddie doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. He's already proven it. So and he is not the kind that lusts for the limelight, like Ali is an example. Who, very frankly, I think that's his biggest problem right now, is he can't stand it that
people are looking at somebody else.
Exactly. And, there comes a time in everybody's life when, we all just took our last look at Tito. He was one of the greatest men who lived on the face of this earth, but it's over now. Mm-hmm. So I view that situation the same way with Eddie. I think as a professional athlete getting back into that ring, I think it would not be money. If it ever did happen, it wouldn't be money. It would have to be a very, very, very deep-seated personal thing with him. And I don't think we'll see that.
All right, getting on just to another subject here, a lot of people have wanted to know, how did Gordon Solie become Gordon Solie, the wrestling commentator? How did it all start?
Well, it all started...
who were you? What were you doing?
Well, I was Gordon Solie, radio announcer, basically, in Tampa. It was back in 1950.
Were you a music type of
I was handling an afternoon shift in radio, and I also did a sports show. The station didn't have a sports program, so they allocated me 15 minutes for a sports show on radio. And so I started going around to the various places here in Tampa where sporting events were being held. And I noticed that the quote sports announcers in town were ignoring automobile racing. They were ignoring wrestling. Many of the sports that they apparently considered beneath them. You know, you talk about automobile race drivers, and you automatically, in those days, you thought about black leather jackets and dirty fingernails.
Mm-hmm.
And wrestling was not, by the elitists, it was not thought of that well. So consequently, I thought, well, here's a market. Here are viable people who are looking to hear information about the sport that they enjoy, and they're not getting it anywhere. So I started specializing my sports program and interviewing wrestlers, interviewing boxers, interviewing
Automobile car racing.
oh yeah, race drivers by all means. And I finally settled down and specialized in two sports, and that was auto racing and wrestling. And thank God I did, because where we're sitting right now is, as far as I'm concerned, the house that wrestling built.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I basically got started, and after that, Cowboy Electoral, of course, was a promoter at the time. And
this was down here in Tampa?
Yeah, in Tampa. So he asked me, he said, this ring announcer quit. And he said, you're doing radio? He said, would you mind coming down doing the ring announcing? And I said, no, I wouldn't mind that at all. And at that time, back in 1950, I got paid the grand sum of $5 a night. Of course, I got into the matches free, too. Don't forget that.
There was a benefit there.
Well, it was $1.25, you know. So it was $6 1/4 if you want to look at it that way.
Were you allowed to stay for the whole show?
Oh, yeah. Had introduced the last match.
Okay.
But from there, Cowboy and I became friendly, and he recognized the fact that I was trying to help the sport. And I went on the road for 3 years with an automobile thrill show, because wrestling used to close down in the summer months in Florida. So I'd go on the road and then come back, and I went to work in the office writing publicity and that sort of thing. And Tom McCune of the Tampa Tribune was then the sports editor of the Tampa Times, and I'd bring in stories, and Tom would look at them and shake his head and say, now, here's the way this should be written, and he'd rewrite it for me. So I finally learned how to write news stories, or at least sports releases. And there was a graduation from there into, staying in the office. When television hit Florida, why, they first hired the late Guy Bagley, because they wanted a known television name, and he was the first sportscaster on the air in this area. So they hired Guy Bagley, and that fell by the wayside. Then they tried a fellow by the name of Bob Jones. That too fell by the wayside. They then had an idea. I was then working educational television and still doing radio. So they tried Saul Fleischman, who was the dean of sportscasters in this area, and I was his backup man, his color man. And it just wasn't suited with Saul, and he just didn't have that kind of temperament to handle. He was a tremendous character and a great personality on the air, but to do play-by-play, I don't think Saul really was a good play-by-play man in any area. Not that he wasn't a great personality on the air, it just wasn't his forte. So finally then I started doing the program on my own, and have been doing it ever since.
Is there any particular thing that you remember? I mean, you've seen a lot of guys hurt, and there must have been one incident where Gordon Solie has been injured or hurt by a professional wrestler.
Well, I wasn't
one or two.
I wasn't hurt by the wrestler per se. I was hurt trying to escape the wrestler. A year ago, April, I was at the Bayfront Center in St. Petersburg, and Dusty and I were in the ring giving away prizes for a contest that had just been held. And Morocco charged the ring behind us. And of course, if I saw what was happening, I bailed out. I bailed out in a hurry. Well, I'm not as swift or agile as I was, and of course I bailed out of the ring, and somebody had spilled a Coke outside the ring, so it was only about a 4-foot drop. But it sprained the ankle, which then became involved in an osteopathic problem, and the leg went sour for about a year. It's about 95% recovered now, but yeah, I remember that one because it was the most recent.
In terms of interviewing wrestlers, is there one wrestler that you've had more trouble with than anyone else? Anybody you really don't care to interview because the guy just he's not cooperative with you or anything?
Well, there are several that I'm not that fond of simply because they're rude to me, and first of all, they have no issue with me. I'm trying to report things as they are. I'm not trying to take sides or issues. But this bad Leroy Brown is one that I'm just not terribly fond of, due to the fact that he grabs the mic and, I think he's a little bit too full of himself. When Rock Hunter was here, I was never that fond of him, although I basically respect his intelligence, his capabilities.
Is there one person you enjoy interviewing more than anyone else?
Well, being basically lazy, yeah, that's a beautiful thing about Dusty. All you have to do is
put a microphone in front of his
just
face.
Say, and here he is, Dusty Rhodes, and zap. If you got 10 minutes to fill, he'll fill it. And that takes care of that. Eddie Graham has always been a good interview. The man has perhaps more innate intelligence than any man I've ever known in my life, and consequently, he knows how to get across what he's saying. Grammatically, sometimes it may not be totally correct, but that's unimportant because you can understand him very clearly. He gets a message across very quickly and very clearly. Jack Briscoe has been a very, very good interview, particularly when he was world heavyweight champion. And speaking about that, too, I think Harley Race, although I still don't particularly care for all of his tactics in the ring, I think he's a man who's matured into his position in life.
Okay. Gordon, I want to thank you, and I also appreciate that you didn't freeze up on me. Gordon?